What we win.
I'm on tonight, my hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel you, boy. Come on, let's go, real slow. Baby, like this is perfect. Oh, you know I'm on tonight, my hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel it's right. The attraction, the tension. Baby, like this is perfection.
Go ahead, switch the style up. Come on, take it home. Hold up. Go ahead, switch the style up. Get your damn hands up. Hold up. Go ahead, switch the style up. Come on, take it home. Hold up. Go ahead, switch the style up. Get your damn hands up. Hold up. Get your damn hands up.
I see you. Come on.
Get your damn hands up. Don't stop, get it. Don't stop, get it. Don't stop, get it. Don't stop, get it. Get your damn hands up.
I'm on tonight, my hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel you, boy. Come on, let's go, real slow. Baby, like this is perfect. Oh, you know I'm on tonight, my hips don't lie, and I'm starting to feel it's right. The attraction, the tension. Baby, like this is perfection.
Let's go. Come on. Let's go. Hey. Let me hear you sing it. Come on. Say what? Hey. Come on.
Ella prende la turbina, no discrimina, no se pierde ni un país de marquesina, se acicala hasta Palestina, luce también que hasta la sombra le combina, asesina, me domina, a mí el carro, motoras y limosina, llena su tanque de adrenalina, cuando escucha el reggaetón en la cocina, ella le gusta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, le encanta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, ella le gusta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, le encanta la gasolina, dame más gasolina. Aquí no somos los mejores, no te mejores, en la pista nos llaman los matadores, tú haces que cualquiera se enamore, cuando bailas a ritmo de los tambores, esto va para las gatas de todos colores, para las mayores, para las menores, para las que son más zorras que los cazadores, para las mujeres que no pagan sus motores.
Vayamos un ponce, tu gasolina, mami mira, ven, mami toma gasolina, me feel un polo, hey you oro, I think I like my stomach, you can both call him Goro, bacalao, los que pollo, that's what I eat, now mommy I'm with Daddy Yankee, so when I beat, hey, she love the way I do it, and flowing on that corner, do it, call me papi chulo, tell me no y dame uno, ven mami vámonos, dale culo, ven chula, pure no basura, this is history we making with Daddy Yankee and Nori, name another rapper messing with reggaeton before me, cállate, suavemente, tranquilo, bendito,
Toma tu gasolina, obligado pendiente, tú me debes algo y lo sabes, conmigo ella se pierde, no le rinde cuentas a nadie, obligado pendiente, tú me debes algo y lo sabes, conmigo ella se pierde, no le rinde cuentas a nadie. Súmale mambo pa' que mi gata prenda los motores, súmale mambo pa' que mi gata prenda los motores, súmale mambo pa' que mi gata prenda los motores, que se prepare que lo que viene es pa' que le den duro, mamita yo sé que tú no te me vas a quitar duro, lo que me gusta es que tú te dejas llevar duro, todos los weekends ella sale a vacilar duro, mi gata no puede janguear porque ella le gusta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, le encanta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, ella le gusta la gasolina, dame más gasolina, le encanta la gasolina, dame más gasolina.
I hop on the plane at LAX with a dream, my cardigan.
Let's go.
Welcome to the land of fame excess.
Hey.
Am I gonna fit in?
Come on.
Jumped in the cab, here I am for the first time. Look to my right and I see the Hollywood sign. This is all so crazy. Everybody seems so famous. My tummy's turning and I'm feeling kinda homesick. Too much pressure and I'm nervous. That's when the taxi man turned on the radio and the Jay-Z song was up.
Let's go.
And the Jay-Z song was up.
Come on.
And the Jay-Z.
Let me hear you sing it. Say what?
Put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Nodding my head like yeah. Moving my hips like yeah. Put my hands up to play my song. I know I'm gonna be okay. Yeah. in my taxi cab, but everybody's looking at me now. Like, who's that chick that's rocking kicks? She gotta be from out of town. So hard with my girls not around me. It's definitely not a Nashville party, 'cause all I see is the letters. I guess I never got the memo. My tummy's turning and I'm feeling kinda homesick. Too much pressure and I'm nervous. That's when the DJ dropped my favorite tip, and the Britney song was on. And the Britney song was on. And the Britney song was on. So I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Nodding my head like yeah. Moving my hips like yeah. I put my hands up to play my song. You know I'm gonna be okay. Yeah. It's a party in the USA. Yeah. It's a party in the USA. Feel like I've been on a flight back to my hometown tonight. Something stops me every time. The DJ plays my song and I feel alright. So I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Nodding my head like yeah. Nodding my head, it's like yeah. I put my hands up to play my song. You know I'm gonna be okay. Yeah. It's a party in the USA. It's a party in the USA. I put my hands up to play my song. The butterflies fly away. Nodding my head like yeah. Moving my hips like yeah. I put my hands up to play my song. You know I'm gonna be okay. It's a party in the USA.
Honey, I can see the stars all the way from here. Can't you see the glow on the window pane? I can feel the sun whenever you're near. Every time you touch me, I just melt away. Now everybody asks me why I'm solid up from ear to ear. But I know nothing's perfect, but it's worth it after fighting through my tears. And finally you put me first. Baby, it's you. You're the one I love. You're the one I need. You're the only one I see. Come on, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one I can always call when I need to make everything stop. Finally, you put my love on top. Oh, come on, baby. You put my love on top, 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 top. You put my love on top. Oh, come on, baby. You put my love on top, 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 top. My love on top. Baby, I can hear the wind whipping past my face as we dance the night away. And boy, your lips taste like the night of champagne as I kiss you again and again and again and again. Now everybody asks me why I'm solid up from ear to ear. But I know nothing's perfect, but it's worth it after fighting through my tears. And finally you put me first. Baby, it's you. You're the one I love. You're the one I need. You're the only one I see. Come on, baby, it's you. You're the one that gives your all. You're the one I can always
Let's go. Come on, Philly, come on. Let's go.
I can't fool myself, I don't want nobody else to ever love me.
Sing.
You are my shining star, my guiding light, my love fantasy. There's not a minute, hour, day or night that I don't love you. You're at the top of my list, cause I'm always thinking of you. I still remember in the days when I was scared to touch you, how I spent my day dreaming, planning how to say I love you. You must have known that I had feelings deep enough to swim in. That's when you opened up your heart and you told me to come and hold my love. 1,000 kisses from you is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Oh my love. A million days in your arms is never too much. I just don't wanna stop. Too much, never too much, never too much, never too much. Woke up today, looked at your picture just to get me started. I called you up, but you weren't there, and I was broken hearted. Hung up the phone, can't be too late, the boss is so demanding. Opened the door up, and to my surprise, there you were standing. Who needs to go to work to hustle for another dollar? I'd rather be with you, cause you make my heart scream and holler. Love is a gamble, and I'm so glad that I am winning. We've come a long way, and yet this is only the beginning of my love. 1,000 kisses from you is never enough. I just don't wanna stop. A million days in your arms is never enough. And I just don't wanna stop.
Baby, we're all alone. Now I can tell ya, girl, you turn me on. I get lifted up high, 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 high. I get lifted up high, 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 high. Bring out the love and desire back. You got the match, all that lights the fire.
let's go, come on.
This ain't what you project, this ain't what you want. This ain't what you want. 600 block. I just wanna rock. I just wanna I just wanna rock. Body out of ya. Shorty got that body out of ya. Hit it once, no time. Set up, you gon' kill my vibe. Stand on my money, don't know my side. Pick them sides, and you better choose wisely. That's my high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's my high.
If you're ready to win this election, let me hear you make some noise right now. Oh yeah. We vote, we win.
This ain't what you want. Project.
Let's go, let's go.
This ain't what you want.
Hey. Let's go, Philly, let's go! Let's get it!
I get money, I'm a star.
Let's go!
I get money, I'm a star.
お金稼ぐ俺らはスター
お金稼ぐ私はスターキラ私はスターHe know who I am, ain't had to say my name. Stack it up like Tetris, but this money ain't a game. Watashi kawaii, kalata.
Let's go!
Drinking out the bottle, getting twisted, Maruchan. Big exotic Hermes, this a crack. Watch too expensive, ain't no way I'm getting clapped. I think I'm so sexy, every shirt I own is cropped. So many carats, diamonds do the bunny hop. US or Japan, if he meet me, he gon' bow. I got yen for your friends, if they pretty, bring them out. Going dumb and Madam Blue, pouring sake in they mouth.
Let's
Told
go.
him put me on his plate, bring them chopsticks
Okay,
to the
okay,
south.
okay.
Honey, I'm a star. I get money, I'm a star.
お金稼ぐ俺らはスター
お金稼ぐ私はスター
キラ
私はスター
Okay!
流れる星たちどこに向かうまた願い叶えながら暮らすチェリー身につけたまま歌うスターたちが集まったスタジオ夜な夜な酒たくさん並ぶアジトさっきまで六本木で収録ラジオそっからテレビ撮影するはしごカメラたち追いかけてる俺たちを大好きピカピカのダイヤ暗いとこ輝いてる毎晩 Nice to meet you する挨拶 I'm so happy ありがたいな
I get money, I'm a star.
Let's go, Philly, let's go!
I get money, I'm a star.
Come on! Let's work! Let's go!
Please welcome Democratic National Committee Chair Jamie Harrison.
Now, y'all sure told me Philadelphia was trying to show out today. Oh my, it is great to be here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And folks, I brought a few friends with me. I am so excited to be here today with our amazing Vice President and the future President of these United States, Kamala Harris. And she is going to be joined in the very first time with our future Vice President, Governor Tim Walz. Folks, Vice President Harris and Governor Walz, they represent the future of our party and of our nation. Their ideas, their vision, and their love for America will carry us toward November, and it will build the foundation for the next 4 years and beyond. My friends, this ticket is set. We know exactly who we are and who our competition is. And we know exactly why we are going to win this race. We're going to win because Vice President Harris has shown that she has what it takes. She's met with countless world leaders and has helped the president repair many of our relationships overseas. Those are the relationships that Donald Trump, as we say in the South, bless his heart, those are the relationships that Donald Trump soured. She has also traveled to every corner of the country to make sure that every single American understands how the Republicans want to rip away women's freedom, how the Republicans want to control women's bodies, how Republicans want to jeopardize their health. So, my friends, there is no one in a better position to build upon the success of the last 3.5 years. And Tim Walz, let me tell you all about Tim Walz. You know, I've known Tim for almost 20 years, and the governor is a perfect person to help her deliver for the American people. His life is marked by public service. He was a social studies teacher like me. He was a football coach. He's a veteran. He was a member of Congress and a governor. And I've known him for so long, folks, going back to when he was a member of the House of Representatives and our Democratic leader on the Veteran Affairs Committee. He has fought for people of Minnesota, and he will join Vice President Harris in fighting for the American people. Now, y'all know I grew up in South Carolina. And my grandpa used to always tell me, he said, Jamie, you got all those fancy degrees, but you got to make it plain for me. So let me make it plain. The Republican Party is built on fear. They have candidates who want to drag us back. But my friends, the Democratic Party, this party is built on hope. Where they think our better days are behind us, we know that our better days are ahead of us. And we have candidates who understand that the vision for our country is anchored in our future. And that is a future that works for every single American, regardless of your race, regardless of religion, regardless of your gender, regardless of your sexual orientation. We don't care. Every American deserves to live the American dream. And you know who we have fighting for us? Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. listen, I know y'all are excited because we have seen the energy all around the country on Zoom calls and rallies. I mean, there's like a Zoom call, people with dogs and cats for Kamala Harris. People who want to send Donald Trump back to Mar-a-Lago for Kamala Harris. We know the American people are with us, but we can't take any of that for granted, my friends. They want us to take it for granted, but we can't. We have to make sure we run every step of the race and lean across that finish line. You know, as the Vice President has said, she knows who Donald Trump is. As Attorney General, she held big banks accountable for California families. Well, Donald Trump was just found guilty of 34 counts of fraud. As the district attorney, she created one of the first environmental justice units in the nation. And Donald Trump told all of the big oil people that he would do their bidding for a campaign contribution. As a prosecutor, she went after predators who abused and sexually assaulted women. Donald Trump, well, we know his history. Folks, Kamala Harris is ready and able to prosecute this race against Donald Trump. She will fight to protect reproductive care. She will fight to expand our rights and freedom. She will fight to defend our democracy. And she will fight the MAGA extremists who want to take over our country with their extreme Project 2025 agenda. My friends, November is right around the corner. And now it is our job to fight for her as she has always fought for us. Now, it is our time to have her back because she has always had ours. So are you ready, Pennsylvania? Are you ready, Philadelphia? So tell your friends, your mama, your grandmama, aunts, aunties, uncles, and everybody else. Tell them to go get their vitamins, get ready, put on their running shoes, get their vitamins from Costco. It's time to knock on some doors. It's time to pick up some calls. It's time to send in some emails. It is time to get out there and vote. And when we vote, let's go make it happen, y'all.
Please welcome Philadelphia Regional Organizing Director Relle J.
Hello, Philadelphia. You guys look good. You guys look real good. My name is Relle J, and I'm a field organizer for Team Harris here in Pennsylvania. Organizers like me talk to voters on a day-to-day basis. And let me tell you what we're seeing on the ground. Pennsylvanians are fired up to elect Vice President Kamala Harris. Together, we are tapping into the groundswell of grassroots enthusiasm that we've seen for the Vice President and her fight to take our country forward. We're mobilizing voters from Philly to Erie and everywhere in between. Together, we're going to roll up our sleeves and do the hard work necessary to defeat Donald Trump this November. My parents immigrated to this country from Ghana in 1990 and worked multiple jobs to support my 8 siblings and me. They sacrificed everything so we could get by and get ahead. Vice President Kamala Harris is committed to fighting for families like mine, while Donald Trump wants to take our country backwards and undermine our freedoms. These are the stakes, but here's the good news. We, the voters, get the final say, and we're going to make our voices heard loud and clear. We're going to send Donald Trump a clear message. We are not going back. Now is the time to dig in. With just around 90 days until Election Day, what we do in this precious time could mean the difference between a nationwide abortion ban under Trump or protecting fundamental freedoms under Vice President Harris. A tax system that works for the wealthy under Trump or one that works for working families under Vice President Harris. The Project 2025 agenda to gut checks and balances and make Trump a dictator on day one or standing up for democracy under Vice President Harris. So here's what we do now. We register new and young voters. Yep. We have meaningful conversations face-to-face with our friends, family, and our neighbors. Vice President Kamala Harris has shown up for folks like me, and now it's time to show up for her. Because when we fight, we win! The path to 270 runs right through Pennsylvania, so it's no exaggeration to say that we are the folks to get us across to the finish line. Let's get to work. Thank you.
Please welcome Mayor of Philadelphia, Cherelle Parker.
Hello, Philadelphia! We've got to do a little roll call on the day. Is Philly in the house? Is Bucks County in the house? Is Chester County in the house? Is Delco in the house? Is Monco in the house? Greetings, Pennsylvania, and welcome, America, to the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. I am Cherelle Parker, and I have the honor and great privilege of serving as the 100th mayor of the city of Philadelphia. The first woman in Philadelphia's 341-year history. vote for me, I need you to know that this is a history-making day here in Philadelphia and in our country, because we are on the cusp of electing our Vice President, Kamala Harris, to be the 47th President of the United States of America. I hope you feel it. You feel it. For those of you who know me, you know it is my mantra to always speak truth to power, and I've got to share a history story with you, each and every one of you. And it happened to me in my life when I was about 8 or 9 years old. I was raised by my grandparents. My grandmother was a domestic worker from Manning, South Carolina. My grandfather, a Navy veteran from Accomack County, Virginia. And the two of them were having a disagreement, and the windows were open in our row house. And I remember being 8, 9 years old, going outside to sit on the steps, and I cried, and a neighbor walked by and said, "Cherelle," nosy neighbor, "why are you crying?" And I said, "Mommy and Daddy are upstairs having a disagreement. They're having an argument, and I don't like it." And my grandmother, y'all, she had the windows open, and she was listening. Somebody said, I know what happened. She called me upstairs. She called me into her room. I walked in, and she gave me a tongue lashing like I have never received before. She said to me, "No matter what goes on in this house, you don't ever go outside telling anybody about what goes on in this house." And the story came back to mind when we were on our way to walk here into Temple University, when I heard someone, they were fast and quick to talk about the fact that our Democratic nominee for President of the United States had made her vice presidential pick that we are all super excited about. Let me hear you say Harris and Walz. But they were looking for something, and I knew what they were looking for. On today, Democrats, we must take a page out of my grandmother's book, that domestic worker from South Carolina, and remember that our Democratic nominee has spoken, and that's it, period, end of story. How do you know, Cherelle Parker, that others will attempt, because of our intense advocacy within our party, they are going to attempt to use divide and conquer to bring us apart so that we can take our eyes off the prize and the only North Star that should be in all of our hearts, minds, and spirits, and that's making sure that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are the next president and vice president of the United States of America. When I tell you that my spirit is full at this moment, it's beaming with pride and dignity and gratitude. Gratitude for our President, Joe Biden, who's dedicated his life 50-plus years. He's made serving our country his mission. Join with me in giving a huge round of applause to President Biden. I want you to know, this is important to me as mayor of Philadelphia. I'm a high school English teacher by profession who just happens to be the mayor. And one of my favorite authors and thought leaders of all time is a gentleman who just would have been celebrating his 100th birthday named James Baldwin. James Baldwin had a quote that he would often state when he was fighting for social and economic justice. He would say, "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do. I can't believe what you say because I see what you do." Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and America. The promise of this moment and what it means for America couldn't be thicker. You can feel the energy in this room. It is tangible and it is palpable. As Vice President of the United States of America, I had the opportunity to meet Kamala Harris when she had just started out on the trail, and she came to Philadelphia to visit on her first campaign sort of meeting here in Pennsylvania. And when she came to Philadelphia, she had a whole lot of other places that she could have been. But guess where she chose to be? In the neighborhood, with the people, in the backyard, talking to women about the power of unity and addressing issues extremely important to those in our nation. But like James Baldwin, I watch what you do. And I want you to know that as Vice President, she has continued to deliver time and time again for the city of Philadelphia. And I've only been here for 7 months. I just got here. I know my mayors across the nation will appreciate this. I never take a picture with a big check before the little check is in the bank. And in Washington, D.C., they've sent $638 million to Philadelphia for water infrastructure, for mass transit, for environmental remediation. I don't just listen. I also saw our Vice President do something that a whole lot of people had counted out. She and I are Divine Nine Sisters and graduates of historically black colleges and universities. Time and time again, she's made sure that she has delivered. My ask as the mayor of Philadelphia here on today is for you to not let any of the tricksters, because you know Trump the trickster. How many people have seen Trump the trickster? That's right. Don't let Trump the trickster take our eyes off the prize. We have to remember that there is nothing that is more important than electing the Harris-Walz team and sending them where they belong, to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, to the White House. You're in Philly. I don't have to tell you about the power and importance of grit and in hustle. You know, that's what we do. We are a city that is based on the presence of resilience and our strength to overcome obstacles. I want you to know that none of us here today should forget that we are Democrats and that we are for the working class and that we support organized labor. And don't forget this. We know that the middle class built America and organized labor built the middle class. Minnesota. I am proud, sir, that you are an educator. You know the power of public education has in helping to close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. I want you to know that we paid attention to your work in Minnesota. Free college tuition for low-income students. Free college tuition for low-income students. Free meals for school children. Protections for the LGBT community. Standing up for workers and union members. I want to say this to you. Are you ready, Philly and Pennsylvania, to rumble for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? When you walk out this door, I want you to put your chucks on and tie them up tight and knock on every door you can to let America know what's at stake. Our citizenship, we must remember, requires that we use the word as both a verb and a noun. And it requires our action. And we have the power in our hands. Let me hear you all say, the power of the people is greater than the people in power. They think they got us. They think they're going to divide and conquer us. They think that we are going to let them throw shade on our Harris and Walz shine. Let me hear you say, don't throw shade on my Harris Walz shine. Don't throw shade on my Harris Walz shine. Today, I'm proud to be here with each of you. When we leave out of here, we've got work to do, and we are going to make sure that Kamala Harris is the 47th President of the United States of America. And that Tim Walz is the Vice President of the United States of America. I saw some folks here. I want you all to put your ones in the air for me. Everybody right now, because this one represents unity. I want you to know that together, we are one city. Let me hear you say one city, one region, one state, and one nation united. Let's go and get to work. Thank you all.
Everyone on the concourse, please take your seats. Everyone on the concourse, please take your seats. Philly, how y'all feeling? How y'all feeling?
Isn't this neat?
Please welcome the United States Senator for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman.
Philadelphia! Philadelphia! Hey, look, I'm a Yinzer. I'm a Steeler guy. And I'm a Sheets guy. But today, we are all Team Harris Walz today right now. Pennsylvania picks the president. We did that in 2020. And in 3 months, we're going to do that again. Look, the choice just could not be any more stark than this. You know, this election is about moving our country forward with Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. Or a couple of really weird dudes. And look, I gotta tell you, I work with J.D. Vance. I do. And I'm here to confirm that he is a seriously weird dude. Look, let's get to work, and it all starts now. Thank you, Philadelphia.
Please welcome the United States Senator for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, Bob Casey.
Thanks, everybody. Hello, Pennsylvania. All right. The reason I ran around that corner is because we want to get to hear from Kamala Harris in a couple of minutes, but I want you to know something. I want you to know something. I know we didn't practice this, but I have 2 questions for every Pennsylvanian in this audience, even if you're not from Pennsylvania. I got 2 questions. The first question, you ready? Are you ready to win for Kamala Harris and Tim Walz? Yeah. And the second question is, are you ready to win for everyone on our ticket? Now, look, I don't have to tell this crowd anything about Kamala Harris's record of public service. You know her. You know her days as a prosecutor putting away dangerous criminals, to her time in the United States Senate and as vice president, fighting for women's rights, voting rights, and workers' rights. You know her service as vice president, as Democrats brought jobs and investment back to our Commonwealth. You also know that Vice President Harris, over and over again, has proven that she's ready to serve as our president and our commander-in-chief on day one. And I am certain that you know the last thing I'm about to say. Not the entire last thing, but what I'm about to say next. You know as well that she is ready to defeat Donald Trump. So, I know.
I am your warrior. I am your justice. I am your retribution.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I know Donald Trump's type.
The 2024 election is in full swing. For every key campaign moment, The Washington Post is there, bringing you live coverage with insight and analysis. From landmark Supreme Court decisions to the sentencing of Donald Trump. We'll be on location reporting live from the Republican and Democratic national conventions and the presidential and vice presidential debates. It all leads up to our 2024 Election Night Special, providing real-time race calls, live updates from our reporters on the ground, monitoring the pivotal races that will determine the balance of power in Washington and the future of our country. No one covers politics and elections like the Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness.
Kamala Harris has her first campaign event tonight with her vice presidential pick, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz. They are in Philadelphia for a rally. You can see the live feed right there. There's Senator Bob Casey getting the crowd excited as they greet the Harris-Walz ticket for the first time. Welcome to live coverage from the Washington Post. I'm Libby Casey. I'm joined in our studio by Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann. James, columnist, Rhonda Colvin, senior political correspondent. Thanks to you both. We will go live to Philadelphia as soon as Kamala Harris and her new VP pick take the stage. Now, this campaign has changed so much. Only 16 days ago did Joe Biden say, "I'm no longer running." Kamala Harris has ascended to be the top of her ticket, and just today, she picked Tim Walz. Tell us more about who he is, James.
She's picked an everyman, someone who was enlisted in the Army, not an officer, a geography teacher in southern Minnesota, won a huge upset against a Republican who had just been reelected by 25 points as part of the 2006 Democratic wave, and then gets elected governor in 2018, reelected in 2022, and with a unified Democratic control of the legislature, passes one of the most progressive agendas of any state in the country, and all of a sudden finds himself as the most liberal in terms of record of the 6 finalists for the job. And now just really 18 years after he was a high school teacher, he is poised to potentially be one heartbeat away from the presidency of the United States.
We're keeping an eye on this rally in Philadelphia, and one of those people who were at the top of that short list, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, will be speaking shortly. So we'll go back to Philadelphia when we see Governor Shapiro talk, because we're all curious to see how he handles this moment. The reporting was, Rhonda, that it was really down to Walz and Shapiro at the top of the list. What do we know about how Kamala Harris made this decision?
Well, we know over the weekend she did interview the 6 men who were on that publicly known short list. And as you said, Shapiro and Walz were on the list last night as the last 2 remaining contenders. But when it comes to her thinking, what we are hearing from sources who know her political thinking, is she wanted someone who she could have a connection with, who she could personally get along with, and she felt as if Walz was likable, and that if he's likable to her, he could be likable to the rest of the nation. I also think that this gives us some insight into her own political strategy and perhaps her political savviness, because she did pick someone. She didn't go the Donald Trump route of picking someone who was kind of just a carbon copy of herself or her priorities. She chose someone where she knew he was going to fill some gaps that she has. Of course, a lot of people know her record as a senator, also when she was a politician in California, and that may have been a little bit of an area of vulnerability for her, because she could be painted as a California progressive, too liberal for the rest of the country. But she gets a person, as James said, who is that everyman, the common man, a high school teacher, someone who's in the National Guard. And I was looking at his record as governor earlier today. There are so many parts and tenets of the Democratic agenda that he has been out front and with his own legislature in Minnesota been able to get things done, that he kind of checks boxes across the whole Democratic fold. So he is a very interesting choice from a strategy perspective as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting how you say he was the most liberal of the top 6 or so who were ultimately really in contention for this spot.
He doesn't present that way. And, I've talked to Harris sources all day. She really liked his biography, the fact that he is this sort of often compared to Chris Farley's characters on Saturday Night Live. She
How
liked
and
that
why?
he won because he's goofy. He's a big ball of energy. He's restless. He feels he's changed his wardrobe a little bit. I've been covering him for more than 15 years, gotten to know him pretty well. He used to wear suits that were too ill-fitting. He kind of, he just was a burly, big guy, and his first term was defined by COVID and George Floyd and the riots in Minneapolis. His second term, because he had this Democratic majority, he was able to push through all these policies. And I'm told that Kamala Harris wants to push through some of those very same policies if she gets the chance to be president. So she found that really appealing, and she just liked him. She liked him.
Our colleague, White House reporter Tyler Pager, is in Philadelphia at Temple University's Leocoris Center. He joins us by phone. Tyler, let's see if you can hear us. What do you expect to hear from Tim Walz tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, well, I can't hear Tyler. So Tyler is in the center right now, and I'm only laughing because he is doing like triple duty, right? He's phoning into us, he's covering this rally live, and he's been sending us missives back about what we expect Tim Walz to say. So if we manage to get Tyler, thank you, Tyler. We'll keep trying to work to connect with you. But we do expect to hear a message tonight from Tim Walz that boosts up Kamala Harris, but also gives us a sense about who he is, James.
His values. He's someone who served in the military, had 2 children because of IVF. His dad died of lung cancer when he was only 19 years old, and the medical bills from his dad's final weeks of life forced his mom to go back to work for years to pay down the hospital debt. I think we are going to, we talked about Chris Farley. One of the things I heard from a Kamala Harris aide was that the staffers were all jokingly comparing him in recent days to Eric Taylor, the coach of Friday Night Lights in the movie, because he was a football coach. He took a team that was winless, got him to win the state championship, and one person said they could really imagine him saying, "Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose." He's this linebacker coach who was also the faculty advisor to the Gay Straight Alliance in rural Minnesota in the 1990s. And so he can sort of give this like pep talk, and he's funny and lighthearted. He's the one who came up with the Republicans are weird branding that has gone so viral. So I think Harris believes that she has found someone who can be a really effective messenger in the blue wall states. Minnesota hasn't voted for a Republican in a presidential election since 1972, although it was pretty close in 2016. But Harris believes that Walz will play well in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, those blue wall states.
All right, let's try Tyler Pager again. Tyler, if you can hear us, tell us what you're expecting tonight.
Yes, I can hear you. As I said earlier, it's a little loud in here, but thanks for having me, Libby.
So, Tyler, what is the energy like? I mean, if you can't hear us, it's for a reason, right? Tell us about what the crowd is like and what you're listening for.
Yeah, we're in a basketball arena here, and Senator Bob Casey is currently talking, and the crowd is very excited. Obviously, this is the first time that Vice President Harris and Governor Walz will appear together in this crucial swing state of Pennsylvania. So a lot of excitement here, and the Vice President and the Governor haven't even worked out on.
I think I can fill in the gaps that Tyler was talking about. They haven't appeared before in this moment, and so there's so much interest and curiosity about what they will be like together. What do we know about how Republicans are trying to hit them today, Rhonda?
Well, we've heard from the Trump campaign. They have painted him as a liberal, saying that he is a Golden State wannabe in the Midwest. We've also heard that I believe Donald Trump's words about him in a campaign email was that Walz would be a bring hell on earth. That he was going after.
It's very dramatic.
Very dramatic. And it was also a campaign email where they were asking for money as well from their supporters. J.D. Vance was asked about him while he was on the way to a speaking engagement, and he did say that he wants to debate him. He also pointed out, I thought this was interesting, he pointed out specifically Walz's response to the George Floyd protest. I think that might be something we'll hear more about, and I think the Harris campaign is prepared for that. But again, we're hearing from the Trump side what we would think that we would hear from the Trump side. I think it'll be interesting moving forward, seeing how voters feel about that, because by picking someone who can be seen as a likable common man, that does paint a very stark contrast for the Trump campaign to go up against. If they are responding in ways that seem dramatic, as you said, or angry, does that play into Harris's favor?
And I mean, Republicans tried to pick someone in J.D. Vance who they thought could speak to the quote-unquote common man, right, who could represent America, the Rust Belt. But the rollout they haven't had control of the rollout in the way that the Harris campaign hopes to have control of the rollout of Tim Walz.
Yeah, and so, I mean, in both cases, the vast majority of Americans really didn't have any kind of understanding of who these guys were, so it's a race. It's a jump ball. Both parties are trying to define their guy before the other side can.
You have to speak in only football analogies.
Yeah.
No basketball.
No, exactly.
No basketball tonight, James. And so J.D. Vance, really Democrats had an opening, and they were able to define him in some ways by showing his old words, his old comments, and using them against him. And Republicans are trying to do the same thing against Tim Walz. Is it working so far?
You know, I think on the left, it did take 3 days to deploy the National Guard after George Floyd. State spending in Minnesota grew by 40%. Tim Walz did raise taxes. I think among a certain set of voters that is breaking through because they've never heard of this guy and they don't see the jovial side. That's why this introduction tonight is so crucial. It's why the Democratic Convention the week after next is so crucial, because they're going to get to show him in this setting where he's great, you know, with his dog and his 2 kids and being the school teacher, and have his former football players and his former students talking about, you know, Coach Walz, Mr. Walz. And so that, if Democrats can nail that, it's going to really help soften Harris, but it's also going to make it harder to portray him as this, you know, San Francisco wannabe. He didn't even go to San Francisco until pretty late in life. It's kind of amusing to watch them to do that, but there are legitimate things in his record to hit. Walz, like, you know, he's been out there on TV defending Harris. One of the things that he's attacked on is, you know, paid family leave, child tax credits, a lot of spending, affordable housing, and he says, well, I want people to, you know, have food, and, you know, he's very good at making pretty liberal ideas sound very reasonable. He is very kind of Midwestern coded, and he just doesn't come across as the angry liberal that Trump wants to define him as. The debate will also be another opportunity where, you know, they'll both be sort of trying to one-up each other. Interestingly, both Walz and Vance talk about their love for Diet Mountain Dew. So we haven't heard the last of that.
You can see this event at Temple University in Philadelphia. People who are attending have gotten red, white, and blue glowing bracelets. It does have this. They're trying to create this feel of like a real vibe of like a stadium concert. It is so interesting that Democrats are finally able to grab crowds right now. Something that Donald Trump brags about all the time, really is singularly focused on very often, crowd size and things like that. He has seemed rattled, frankly, by the fact that Kamala Harris is now able to get crowds and get people to turn out for her like this. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in the last few weeks with some of his responses, how he spoke about her at the NABJ convention. I think it does show that his campaign may feel like they were thrown a curveball in the switch up with, Biden leaving and Harris coming in. This also might be a little bit of a curveball. A lot of people were thinking Shapiro would be the one, even late as last night. So it does seem as if the Republican Party is going to have to figure out their messaging. I mean, both parties are, but that they are going to figure out where will be the most effective area to hit Walz and connect Harris as well, and go up against someone who is going to be defined, as we keep saying, a common man. And one of the things, I know he kind of coined that phrase weird. Well, he didn't coin it, but he's been using it. The word I've been hearing all day is normal when people have been describing him, whether that's people on the Hill who have been saying he's the one, I'm so glad she picked him, or that's just people who've worked with him before have said he's just so normal. He's going to inject normalcy into this campaign. And, years ago, that might not have been a big thing, but things have been pretty abnormal for this political cycle. And I think, especially the voters I've spoken to, they could probably use some normalcy. So in that way, this could be a very effective pick.
Just think, 16 days ago, Kamala Harris was not even nowhere near the top of the ticket, right? She was solidly running as Joe Biden's vice presidential candidate, running for re-election, and now in just 16 days, they've been able to launch this. She has officially gotten the Democratic nomination because they had this virtual roll call vote that started just last week. So she is the nominee. She's chosen Tim Walz, so we'll see more of this rollout in just, under 2 weeks' time as the Democratic National Convention gets underway in Chicago. We're watching for Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania, to take the stage in just a moment, and we want to listen to hear what he has to say and how he addresses this moment. Republicans today have been very critical of Democrats for not having him as their vice presidential pick, and it's been fascinating, James. Top members of the Republican Party have accused Kamala Harris of being swayed by anti-Semitic forces and sort of made it this issue because he is Jewish. Of course, that is not how Kamala Harris made this decision. Why are they pushing so hard to say you made the wrong choice?
Pennsylvania is called the Keystone State, and it is going to be key to this election. It's very hard to imagine Harris winning without Pennsylvania. Shapiro's approval rating is over 60%. On paper, it makes a lot of sense to have someone like Shapiro, and I think that they're trying to create this contrast. There were fears among Republicans that putting Shapiro on the ticket would take Pennsylvania off the map for them. But because it was such a compressed timeline, comfort level mattered hugely. And I'm told that Shapiro's interview with Kamala Harris on Sunday didn't go well. And Harris just really had a great conversation. She really connected and felt very comfortable with Walz. Remember, she's a VP. She's picking someone to have the job that she has. So she understands what makes someone good in that role. She obviously wants someone as loyal to her as she's been to Joe Biden, and Joe Biden was to Barack Obama. And I think that she sort of felt, I'm told, that Shapiro was sort of showboating, and obviously there was some nervousness about a risk you're taking. Is there going to be big blowback from the protesters? Is it going to cost you support in Dearborn, Michigan, if you put someone who's been outspokenly pro-Israel on the ticket?
He's been critical of Netanyahu.
He's been more critical of Netanyahu
it's not a black and white.
Than Harris has, and and I think that they would have been okay doing that. She's obviously married to an observant Jewish man, but I think it was a whole host of factors, and now Republicans are saying, oh, like that's why she didn't choose him, and are trying to use that contrast to say she could have picked the more moderate candidate, and she picked the more liberal candidate. That tells us who she is. That tells us what kind of president she would be.
We see a drumline now at the front of the stage, getting the crowd really excited. You just couldn't have events like this 4 years ago after the primary process because of COVID and the pandemic. So this is a new moment, really, for so many Americans to get to be part of, whether it's a Trump rally again or whether it's something like this. We're continuing to watch the stage as things play out. Do you buy Republicans like gloating or saying Harris should have picked Shapiro? Why are they so focused on this?
I think that they know Pennsylvania's the ball game. I think they sort of honestly expected it to be Shapiro. They were prepped for Shapiro, and they didn't think she would actually choose Walz. And so I do think it's sort of surprising to them. Even
it's just interesting not to go after Tim Walz, but to say they made the wrong. It does feel a little bit.
It is a little
like
weird.
a little bit of.
I think they were ready to go after Shapiro, and they'd be saying the opposite. If they'd be saying, "Oh, he's a Obama wannabe," they'd be going after Shapiro in a very different way if he had been the pick.
Our colleague, White House reporter Yasmeen Abutaleb, now joins us by phone. And Yasmeen, you are not at this wild rally in Philadelphia, so you hopefully be able to hear us. Tell us about what this process was like getting Tim Walz to join the Harris ticket.
Pretty whiplash, unprecedented process in that it all took place over the course of 2 weeks. And this is the vice presidential pick process, I think as we saw with Trump, usually plays out over months, and you've got people sort of jockeying and lots of public scrutiny and various lists of potential contenders. This process started basically in the hours after Kamala Harris became the presumptive Democratic nominee just about 2 weeks ago. Her team says they're very confident they did a thorough vetting process and feel confident in the final decision. But basically, this process was condensed where former Attorney General Eric Holder's firm did the vetting. They ultimately produced a list of 9 candidates who went through the vetting process. They finished that vetting by Thursday. They did, sort of a lightning round of final interviews throughout Friday and the long weekend. And then Harris had made her pick by Monday night and informed Tim Walz this morning.
So, Yasmeen, what does Harris see him bringing to the ticket?
I think there were a few things that made Tim Walz stand out above the other 2 finalists, Mark Kelly and Josh Shapiro. One was just her personal chemistry with him, and I think that was ultimately the most important factor. We knew going into the final round of interviews that she held personally on Sunday that she was valuing personal chemistry and someone that she saw as a governing partner, almost to an outside degree, that was very important to her, more so than resume or maybe even what people saw as electoral appeal by the different candidates. And I think she also was very taken by his governing record in Minnesota. Her aides have said that mirrors a lot of what she wants to do on the national level. And also they felt his resume and some other sort of more personal traits like that he's a hunter and a gun owner would make him able to reach into Midwestern states, into rural parts of North Carolina and Georgia and Arizona and other states that they'd like to win, but especially the key battleground states in the Midwest, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, that he would be able to talk to those voters and reach them and be accessible. And he also has a communication style that they feel is accessible that not many Democrats have.
Yasmeen, this is such a unique situation. There are only 3 months left until Election Day, and while VP choices are often rolled out around this time of year in advance of a convention, there's usually a much longer vetting process that can go on, and a campaign isn't thrown together in just 16 days, as we've seen the Harris campaign have to do. Can you tell us about how they are using resources that were part of the Biden-Harris campaign, how they're doing things new? What's the operation been like?
Well, Harris basically took over Biden's campaign infrastructure. So she retained a lot of his top staff, including Jen O'Malley Dillon, who was his campaign chief. A lot of the same staffers have stayed on and now just transferred to the Harris campaign. And we know with this vice presidential pick, because it was such a lightning fast pick, that they actually prepared materials for all 3 finalists, stump speeches, website graphics, in case her decision went into Tuesday morning, so that they were sort of ready to go for the final announcement today.
All right, Yasmeen Abutaleb, thank you so much, White House reporter, joining us by phone. Really appreciate it. Rhonda, there will be such an interesting debate process happen now. Will we see Tim Walz and J.D. Vance debate? J.D. Vance says yes. Tell us about if and how that could happen. Is there a chance that we'll see Kamala Harris and Donald Trump debate? What are you going to be watching for as an opportunity to really compare these candidates?
I think we all are asking these questions for our own schedules as well. We know there was a VP debate on the books. It was taken off the books. It was negotiated also during the time of the RNC when J.D. Vance and Harris did have a phone call, but because no one knew if Harris would be or if Biden would be on that ticket, the Republicans did not want to agree on a debate date. In terms of the presidential debate, that feels like it's in a bit of flux right now because there was a date, I believe it was September 10th, run by ABC News. However, Trump has said he doesn't want to do that. He would rather have Fox. Harris says, no, we're going with what, you all had decided before. So it seems like we're all wondering when, where, and how these debates might occur, which does raise a very interesting question because you do have Republicans and Trump supporters talk about they like how he can answer anyone and he's always ready. But yet, if he can't debate or seems to have problems debating Harris, does that, kind of put a dent in that sort of persona that he's been building? If it looks like he's complaining that he wants it on his terms, what does that do? It's a really interesting dance we're all watching right now. But I'm not sure we have a confirmed date for either the presidential or the VP debate right now.
Let's talk about Tim Walz. And not only has he served as Minnesota's governor, he served in Congress. And there were leaders in Congress like Nancy Pelosi who were eager to see him join the Harris ticket. Tell us about Congressman Tim Walz.
Yeah, one of the interesting things about him as a congressman is he won a district that was a very red district. And in fact, he was the second, James, I believe you probably know the statistic as well, he was the second non-Republican to win that district in Minnesota's history. So he's able to win over folks who may not see eye to eye with him. And he won multiple re-elections as a congressperson. He was on the Agriculture Committee, Veterans Affairs. That's sort of where he did make his mark. He wanted to be sort of this moderate in Congress who cared about and focused on veteran affairs. He also helped negotiate a few of the iterations of the Farm Bill, which is that bill that has to come up every 5 years and be reauthorized by Congress. Right now, we're wondering about the current shape of the Farm Bill. But when he was in Congress, he did help draft that and negotiate it. And that really is a hard-fought piece of legislation when it's negotiated. So that does sort of show some of the strengths he had on the Hill. But I think really one of the most interesting parts of his time on the Hill was the fact that he kept getting reelected. And I think that does show you that he is a popular person within his own people.
James, when he was in Congress, he had a top NRA rating.
He went from an A+ rating to an F rating. Yeah.
So how did he evolve as a member of Congress?
So what happened was, he beats this guy unexpectedly. The DCCC wouldn't even return his calls. The first time he heard from Rahm Emanuel, he told me, was October 15th, 2006, when he sent an internal poll to D.C. saying, look, I'm in striking distance against this guy, Gil Guttenicht.
That's just weeks before the election.
Weeks before the election. No one thought he could win. And so he wins. He ends up getting reelected, 4 or 6 points. But then in 2016, Hillary Clinton loses his district badly, and he only wins by 1 point. So that's why he decides, gosh, my odds of winning statewide might actually be better than winning in this reddening congressional district. That's what prompts him to run for governor, and then to win in a crowded Democratic primary, he takes a bunch of liberal positions and then had a Democratic legislature and was willing to sign whatever they sent him.
We'll talk more about his track record as a legislator and lawmaker in a moment. We can see there Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro on the stage getting a very warm welcome from the Pennsylvania crowd. A reminder that they are at Temple University in Philadelphia, and we know that Shapiro is one of the top two. He was said to be the top two finalist here for Kamala Harris's pick. He met with her over the weekend in a meeting here in Washington at the Naval Observatory, her residence, as did Tim Walz, and Kamala Harris chose to pick Walz. So let's hear what Josh Shapiro has to say to this gathered crowd. This could have been a very different night for him, but a real goal of tonight is to try to show this unity and show that he's on board with this campaign nonetheless.
I love you, Philly! And you know what else I love? I love being your governor. Thank you very much. Y'all fill my heart. And I love you so much. And I want you to know, every single day,
I go to work for you. I put my shoulder to the wheel, and I focus on 3 simple letters in our alphabet: G, S, D. I focus on getting shit done for all of you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I want you to know I am going to continue to pour my heart and soul into serving you every single day as your governor. And I'm going to be working my tail off to make sure we make Kamala Harris and Tim Walz the next leaders of the United States of America. That's right. Let me tell you about my friend Kamala Harris, someone I've been friends with for 2 decades. She is courtroom tough. She has a big heart. And she is battle-tested and ready to go. Whether in a courtroom, whether fighting as Attorney General, whether remembering the people who have oftentimes been left behind when she was sitting in the halls of power in the Senate, Kamala Harris has always understood that you got to be every day for the people, for the people. And she has served with honesty. She has served with dignity. And every step of the way, she's broken barriers to serve all of us. Now, Philly, hear me on this. That's a hell of a stark contrast from the guy running on the other side. Oh, y'all know who I'm talking about, I guess. You see, we remember here in Philly what it was like when Donald Trump was our president. We remember when he was president, it was more chaos, fewer jobs, and less freedom. You see, Philly, I know y'all, we walk around with a little bit of a chip on our shoulder because we remember, right? And we remember that it was Donald Trump that ripped away the freedom of millions of American women to make decisions over their own bodies. We remember that. We remember that. We're not going back. We are not going back. You're right. Not going back. And here's the thing. We don't want to go back, but let's go back for a second. Just remember. Let's just remember, because I think there's some folks out there that still have a little bit of brain fog, having a hard time remembering what it was like. Now listen, he brought all that chaos and limited our freedoms back when he was president, and let's be honest, didn't know what the hell he was doing. He didn't. But this is serious, gang. He knows what he's doing now. He does. And the Supreme Court that he packed, the Supreme Court that he has packed has ruled that he is above the law. He is outside of the law. And now he's got a clear plan. They all wrote it down in that whole Project 2025 thing. And they got a clear plan to take away more of our freedoms. They got a clear plan to use the Justice Department to go against our enemies. They got a clear plan to isolate us in the world. And let me tell you something, I ain't going back. I am not going back. I'm not. And neither do you want to go back. We are not going back. We're not going back. No. We're not. And not only are we not going back, we're not going into the future with Donald Trump, not going in the future with him. A guy who has made clear, he's told us what he wants to do, more chaos, less freedom. And yo, friends, it was Maya Angelou who said it. When they tell you who they are, yeah, I believe them, and I don't want to see that. And Donald Trump, well, he's now got a partner with him. Y'all see that guy? Yeah. J.D. Vance, he's not exactly off to a good start. I think we can all agree on it. But I think part of the reason why he's not off to a good start is this, and it's serious. He doesn't know who he is. And he's not being honest with himself, so he can't be honest with the American people. He can't. Now, so if I hear you right, and I think I do, you're chanting, he's a weirdo. Which means, man, I love you, Philly. Which means, if you're chanting, he's a weirdo, then you heard of my good friend and our next vice president, Tim Walz. Because Tim Walz, in his beautiful Midwestern plain-spoken way, he summed up J.D. Vance the best. He's a weirdo. And I want to talk about Tim Walz, because Philly, in a minute, he's going to come out here, and I want you to give him a whole lot of love. Tim Walz is a great man. Tim Walz is an outstanding governor. Tim Walz is a teacher. Tim Walz is a guardsman. Tim Walz is a great patriot. He is. And I'll tell you what else. Tim Walz is a dear friend. And I want you to know, Lori and I feel blessed to have Tim and Gwen in our lives. They are outstanding public servants. And I can't wait for you, Philly, the rest of this Commonwealth, and our entire country to get the chance to know the Walzes, the next vice president and second lady of this nation. Now, I think it is fitting, and it is special, that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz have chosen to launch their campaign right here in Philadelphia, in the city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. And importantly, they chose to launch their campaign right here in the birthplace of real freedom. You know, The other side, Trump and his sycophants, let me tell you something. They love to talk a good game about freedom, right? They love to cloak themselves in the blanket of freedom all the time. They love to talk a good game. But hear me on this. It's not freedom to tell our children what books they're allowed to read. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It's not freedom to say you can go to work, but you can't join a union. That's not freedom. It's not freedom to tell women what they're allowed to do with their bodies. That's not freedom. It's not. It's not. It is not. No, it's not. It is not. And it won't be that way when Kamala Harris is our president. And it sure as hell isn't freedom to say you can go vote, but he's going to pick the winner. That is not freedom. That's not what patriots have fought for over the years. It is not. You know what we are for? You know what Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are for? They are for real freedom. They are. The kind of real freedom that comes when we look that young girl in North Philly in the eye and we invest in her public school because we believe in her. We believe in real freedom, the kind of freedom that comes when we invest in our police and we invest in our communities because we believe that young girl should walk to and from school safely and back to her mama at the end of the night. We believe in real freedom where the young girl can grow up and be whatever she wants. She can be a welder. She can go to college. She can be who she is. That is real freedom, and that is what we are fighting for. We believe in the kind of real freedom where she grows up in a community where she can breathe clean air and drink clean water and know that she will leave an environment to the next generation that is great for her kids and her grandkids. And Kamala Harris and Tim Walz believe in a real freedom where you can marry who you love and be who you are. Now, freedom is on the ballot. And our fundamental freedoms are at risk. And I know when it's at risk, it's easy to feel uneasy. And it's easy to get down. But let me tell you something, Philly. Let me tell you something, Pennsylvania. Let me tell you something, America. I am more optimistic than ever before. And the reason I'm more optimistic than ever before is because of all of you. And because of what a band of patriots started here in our taverns and our town squares and at Independence Hall just a couple miles from here nearly 2.5 centuries ago. You see, they came together. They came together to declare our independence from a king, and we're not going back to a king. And we're not going back. And when they declared that independence from a king, they came together and they said, we are going to form a union. And over the last 248 years, the reason why I'm optimistic, the reason why I'm hopeful, is because as we've written this American story over the last 2.5 centuries, it's been ordinary Americans taking up the baton from those patriots and saying, we're going to do extraordinary things. Octavius Catto understood that responsibility. Cecil B. Moore understood that responsibility. Gen Z, when they're organized and on TikTok, understand that responsibility. And I'm optimistic today because the task of perfecting our union, the task of defending our fundamental freedoms, it now falls to all of you. To freedom-loving Americans all across this great country. And to the good people of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania who will decide this next election and understand our unique responsibility. I love you too, and this is a moment where we all have to understand that while we'll see Kamala Harris and Tim Walz's names on the ballot, that this election isn't just about their names on this ballot. This election is about all of you. And whether or not you're willing to do this hard work to fight for our freedom, whether or not you're willing to do this hard work that started here 248 years ago. I want to just say this. I lean on my family and I lean on my faith, which calls me to serve. And I am proud of my faith. Now hear me. I'm not here to preach at y'all, but I want to tell you what my faith teaches me. My faith teaches me that no one is required to complete the task, but neither are we free to refrain from it. That means that each of us has a responsibility to get off the sidelines, to get in the game, and to do our part. Are you ready to do your part? Are you ready to form a more perfect union? Are you ready to build an America where no matter what you look like, where you come from, who you love or who you pray to, that this will be a place for you? And are you ready to look the next President of the United States in the eye and say, hello, Madam President? I am too, so let's get to work.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro getting a very warm welcome from the Philadelphia crowd. This could have been his moment to be part of the Harris-Shapiro ticket because it was down to him and Tim Walz, but Kamala Harris chose Tim Walz. The speech there was a real rousing call for supporting the Harris-Walz ticket, but it was also a bit of an audition for Josh Shapiro, fair to say?
Absolutely. He knows that a lot of people are watching. He's thinking about 2028. Also, the Harris campaign, because they didn't know until the last minute who she would pick, printed all the signage to say Harris-Shapiro. So there are these signs that they're going to have to throw away, that sign that we see there where it says Harris-Walz. And obviously it was not lost on Josh Shapiro. He's gotten passed over for this job. He's trying to make the case that he's really focused on Pennsylvania, going to be a great governor, will get reelected in 2026. And certainly if Harris loses and does not carry Pennsylvania, he would be in a position to sort of say, I told you so, and would be an obvious top-tier contender for the Democratic nomination. If Harris wins, of course, she will almost certainly seek another term in 2028 with Walz on the ticket.
The focus right now, though, is not on Josh Shapiro.
No.
It's on Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, Rhonda.
That's correct. And this is going to be an important moment because actually all 6 of those who are on her short list, they had low name recognition nationally. And Walz was actually one of the lowest on that 6. He did not have as high name recognition as someone like Mark Kelly or any of the others. So he really is going to be stepping on this stage, introducing himself to the world, essentially, and also coming after such a rousing speech from the state's governor as well, who is also thinking about his further ambitions. So this is definitely going to be a very important speech for Democrats who want to get to know him, and also those who are still a little bit on the fence in terms of who they're going to support in November.
This is live coverage from the Washington Post. We're watching this campaign launch of Harris-Walz. Kamala Harris has picked Tim Walz just today, announcing that he is her running mate. That's who she's going to have on the ticket with her. She is now officially the Democratic nominee after a virtual roll call that just happened, wrapped up over the past week. We're going to go live to all of the events that they show us from here on out. And I'm with Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann. I'm Libby Casey. We'll talk in between things and give you some analysis and perspective. We'll also talk to you after they take the stage. They are in the Liacouras Center at Temple University. We saw Senator Fetterman come in. We saw Senator Casey. Bob Casey has a reelection battle going on right now against Dave McCormick, someone who got a speaking spot at the RNC. And then we saw Josh Shapiro sort of, getting people warmed up and getting them excited. What does this moment, Rhonda laid out the stakes for us. What do you think this moment means for Tim Walz?
Yeah, I mean, the crowd is amped. They're fired up. Democrats have really doubled down on sort of trying to excite the base. Kamala Harris clearly believes that this is a base election. So does Trump. And whichever side can get more of their people out is going to win. And obviously Tim Walz is going to try to appeal to the middle, but I bet, and he's going to set a tone here. I mean, the truth is that most Americans have never seen him speak. Maybe they've seen some little video clips, maybe they've seen something on social media, but this is the first time that we're going to, for the vast majority of Americans, actually hear a speech from Tim Walz. And the challenge as the number 2 is how much do you talk about yourself and your own story and your own values, and how much do you talk about your running mate? You're ultimately Kamala Harris's hype man. One of the other things that will be fascinating to watch when Walz talks is how much is he an attack dog? That's traditionally the VP role. Tim Walz relishes it. He's currently the chairman of the Democratic Governors Association. He obviously did the weird branding that led the crowd to chant, he's a weirdo, about J.D. Vance. And so I'm going to be fascinated to see how much he talks about himself, because he is introducing himself, how much he talks about Harris and why she's so great in his view, and then how much he attacks Trump and J.D. Vance. My hunch is he'll sort of thread the needle. He doesn't want to go on too long. You kind of want to leave him wanting more. But I think there's definitely going to be some biographical information here, just because a lot of people don't know his pretty remarkable origin story.
The poll report is pointing out that the Liacouras Center has like 10,000 seats, and the seats are filled. So that gives you a sense of the attendance right now. It's always hard to get a really accurate read on crowd size, but when you fill a venue, that's a good indication. And what a difference this is from just a couple of months ago when, the Biden campaign, but even Joe Biden going out and doing just regular sort of presidential speeches and stuff like that really couldn't get a big crowd, James.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Biden basically camped out in Pennsylvania. He likes to joke, because he's from Wilmington, which is basically a suburb of Philadelphia, that he was Pennsylvania's 3rd senator for 36 years. He has had more events in Pennsylvania than anywhere else, and ultimately he still couldn't draw a big crowd. He didn't have a lot of energy. African-American turnout in Philadelphia was actually down, in 2020 and 2022, just by sheer numbers. Percentage-wise, he was still hitting old Democratic targets, but he just wasn't exciting people. And you could feel it when you went to his events. He was in Philadelphia just last month as he was trying to shore up his campaign, and they didn't have a big rally. They had some small event at a union hall, and I mean it's remarkable because we're watching. It's the same campaign staff basically. Harris has brought in some of her people, some Obama people.
So I was going to say some Obama people.
They have come in like David Plouffe, who was Obama's 2008 campaign manager. But ultimately, there's just this invigoration that you sense from talking to Harris, who were formerly Biden staffers. The donors are pumped. The Harris campaign said a few hours ago that they raised $10 million in small dollar grassroots donations today since the Walz news was announced. And clearly, there's no part of the Democratic base that has complained about Walz vocally. You have AOC on one side and Joe Manchin on the other, all saying he's a great pick.
Yeah, tell us more about those reactions, Rhonda.
Yeah, and also Ilhan Omar, who is a congresswoman and part of that so-called squad.
And from Minnesota.
She also, from Minnesota. She also spoke favorably about him as well, too. And immediately, it's not like these statements came out, a day later. Immediately, you saw sort of all corners of the Democratic congressional arm say very favorable things about this pick. And that's important because actually my mind went, after learning the news today, my mind actually went to down ballot races. And I'm specifically thinking about Sherrod Brown in Ohio, John Tester, two of the key Senate races that we have been watching for a year that will likely be very competitive in terms of who will hold power in the Senate. Is Walz going to be able to contribute to them now that he's on this ticket? I could see him campaigning in Ohio, where I didn't really see Biden or Harris doing well there. But Walz sort of sounds and appears and resonates with folks who are in those states that, are like Ohio or Michigan, Pennsylvania, of course. One thing I've heard from Democrats over the last few weeks after, Biden stepped out is that they knew they didn't have time, and there wasn't time to think of a new process, think of new candidates. They are going to coalesce behind pretty much anyone that Harris did pick. But there does seem to be a lot of energy behind this particular pick. So I am really interested to see how that might translate when it comes to congressional races as well, because they are very excited for very specific reasons, because they do think that his brand of politics is something that can be sold when they're on the trail as well.
There was a real audition process in a way over the past 2 weeks, James, as it became clear that Kamala Harris would not be challenged for the top of the ticket, something that we really didn't know could have happened 2 months ago. As Democratic strategists had real concerns, if Biden steps down, what would it mean? How would a candidate be chosen? Very quickly, Kamala Harris solidified support, and then we saw all of these surrogates like Tim Walz going on television, going on podcasts, doing funny interviews with people, trying to be sort of disarming, talking about the weird Republicans at the top of the Republican ticket. Was this the place that Democrats got to test out some of the talent?
Yeah, it is almost, and this sounds like a bad analogy, but it's not. It's almost Trump-like that, these candidates were being judged for their ability to kind of crush a cable TV hit. But that was clearly part of it, and clearly she wants a messenger, and you saw everyone just sort of be ever present. Pete Buttigieg was on TV nonstop, and ultimately it all worked to Harris's advantage because they were all out there promoting her. A lot of the people who wanted to audition for VP were people who, if it had really been a truly open process, might have wanted to run themselves. And some of it is just age. Kamala Harris was born in 1964. Joe Biden was born in the early 1940s. And in the week after his disastrous debate performance on June 27th, Biden made 20 phone calls to congressional types. In the 10 hours after Biden dropped out, Harris made more than 100 calls. And she stayed loyal till the end, but she moved really quick to consolidate support. And I do think you're thinking about who's going to be a loyal partner, who do you trust? And so watching people go out there and really just give it their all to make the case for her, I think really did make a difference.
Y'all made a great point that Kamala Harris has gone through this process by being chosen to be Joe Biden's running mate. Everything from sort of knowing what the ropes are for being on the campaign trail, although it was a weird year because it was the pandemic, to how you stay in your lane, right? How you offer advice, how you offer feedback, but how you recognize the limitations of the vice presidency, even in some of these introductory meetings that she's had with people, perhaps.
Yeah, and what is your portfolio going to be? What are the issues you would really want to work on, right? Harris has gotten a lot of credit for her championing reproductive rights since Dobbs. She's clearly thinking about what role is this person going to play if we actually win.
So
it's not just about winning.
We're hearing the walk-on song right now by Beyonce, which Kamala Harris has gotten permission to use, something that doesn't always happen in politics. And this is a song that's really become part of the campaign in just the last couple of weeks as it's come together so quickly. What does it mean to have this? Oh, here we go. So we're seeing them come out. So they're going to have a rollout video, we expect, which will be a little bit hard to check out. So we'll just stay here and watch and see what happens. But Kamala Harris and Tim Walz were just introduced. And of course, they're introduced as the next president and vice president, as people always are at these sorts of campaign rallies. And there's Tim Walz's introduction to the national stage as a vice presidential candidate.
Clearly enjoying himself.
Yeah. Bigger crowds than you saw, James, when he was running for Congress 15 or so years ago. Yeah.
6 or 7 people in a diner in a town of 200. It really is a remarkable trajectory to go from 6 terms in the Congress, where he intentionally kept a pretty low national profile because he was in a red district. He was a Democrat. He didn't want to be associated with some of the big controversial national cultural issues. Was a reliable vote, voted for things like the Affordable Care Act, and has really grown his profile in recent years. He was never someone viewed as having the ambition to be on this stage until pretty recently. Had a crowded field even to run for governor, was perceived as a moderate, and proved some of those critics wrong during 6 years now as governor of Minnesota.
We'll hear about how Kamala Harris talks about her campaign and also the man she's chosen to be her running mate. And we'll hear how Tim Walz talks about the top of the ticket, as well as shares some of his own biography and tries to hit Donald Trump as well, the man who they hope to defeat to be in the White House come January. Just 3 months till Election Day. Really pretty incredible to think how tight this timeline is. I was counting, it's like 13 weeks. And between here and there is the Democratic National Convention, just about a week and a half's time, 2 weeks' time. The Liacouras Center at Temple University holds about 10,000 people, so that gives you a sense of the crowd there. We continue our live coverage here from the Washington Post of this first campaign event between Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Good to be back in Pennsylvania. So let me say, on behalf of myself and the first second gentleman of the United States, my husband, Doug Emhoff, thank you for the warm welcome. And let me just say, it's good to be here with all of the friends, all of the leaders who are here. I want to thank former Governor Ed Rendell, Senator Bob Casey, who we will re-elect this November, Senator John Fetterman, Mayor Cherelle Parker, and Chairman Jamie Harrison. And it is so good to be here with your incredible Governor, Josh Shapiro. And I will say, Josh is a dear, dear friend and an extraordinary leader. He and I have been spending a lot of time together over the years. And I told Josh, look, I am so invested in our friendship in doing this together, because together with Josh Shapiro, we will win Pennsylvania. Thank you, Josh. I thank you. So Philadelphia, I launched my campaign for the President of the United States a mere 2 weeks ago. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And just last night, the delegates to the Democratic National Convention finished voting. And so I stand before you today to proudly announce I am now officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that. And to all the friends, listen, we also need to level set. We are the underdogs in this race. But we have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against. Now, many of you know, before I was elected vice president or elected a United States senator, I was an elected attorney general, and before that, elected district attorney. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. So in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who scammed consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, Donald Trump's type. So, but let me just say, hold on. This campaign, our campaign, is not just a fight against Donald Trump. Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future. It's a fight for the future. In Pennsylvania, we fight for a future with affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable child care, paid leave. We fight for a future where we build a broad-based economy, where every American has the opportunity to own a home, to start a business, and to build wealth. We fight for a future where we bring down prices that are still too high and lower the cost of living for America's families. So that they have a chance not just to get by, but to get ahead. We fight for a future where we defend our most fundamental freedoms. The freedom to vote. The freedom to be safe from gun violence. The freedom to love who you love openly and with pride. woman to make decisions about her own body, not having her government tell her what to do. So, I love you too. So here's the thing. Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class. A patriot who believes, as I do, in the extraordinary promise of America. A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all. So, Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota. So, to those who know him best, Tim is more than a governor. To his wife, Gwen, he is a husband. To his kids, Hope and Gus, he is a dad. To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz. To the people of southern Minnesota, for 12 years, he was congressman. To his former high school students, he was Mr. Walz. And to his former high school football players, he was Coach. And in 91 days, the nation will know Coach Walz by another name, Vice President of the United States. So America, for some folks, they're just getting to know Coach Walz's story. And I'll tell you, he is the proud product of a middle-class family in rural Nebraska. He is a veteran who served our nation in uniform for more than 2 decades as a member of the Army National Guard, and he went to college on the GI Bill. He is someone who, long before he entered politics, worked as a teacher. When Coach Walz and his wife Gwen moved from his native Nebraska to Minnesota nearly 30 years ago, they both took jobs at the local high school. Coach Walz taught social studies, Gwen taught English. After school, Tim was the linebackers coach for the football team. where I've heard the stories about he had a knack for using the game of football to teach life lessons. He saw the potential in kids who sometimes didn't even see it in themselves. Under those Friday night lights, Coach Walz motivated his players to believe they could achieve anything. And together, they defied the odds, hear this out, going from a winless record to the school's first ever state championship. And I'll say and I'll add, Tim wasn't only a role model on the football field. Around that same time, Coach Walz was approached by a student in his social studies class. The young man was one of the first openly gay students at the school and was hoping to start a gay-straight alliance. At a time when acceptance was difficult to find for LGBTQ students, Tim knew the signal that it would send to have a football coach get involved. So he signed up to be the group's faculty advisor. And as students have said, he made the school a safe place for everybody. In the high school yearbook, the students voted Coach Walz the, quote, most inspiring faculty member. And as I think everyone here can see, Tim Walz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having, and that every kid deserves. The kind of coach, because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves. So it was Coach Walz's students who actually helped him decide to run for office. And he served 12 years in Congress, representing a purple district as he reached across the aisle to get things done. He was the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the United States Congress. And the top Democrat on the Veterans Committee. And he was known as one of Capitol Hill's best marksmen, winning a bipartisan sharpshooting contest year after year. In Washington, Tim worked to raise the minimum wage, to protect the freedom of workers to join a union, and he cast one of the critical votes to pass the Affordable Care Act. which of course gave health insurance to tens of millions of Americans. I'm going to tell you, when we win, Tim and I will continue to make the Affordable Care Act even stronger. We will win. Now, let's talk about what we're dealing with on the other side. So on that last topic, if Donald Trump gets the chance, he will end the Affordable Care Act and take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. Well, Governor Walz and I will not let that happen. Because we believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. As governor, Tim has continued to fight for working families. He secured paid leave for workers in Minnesota. And he refused, as governor, to allow any student in their public schools to go hungry. So he made school breakfast and lunch free for every child. And Tim Walz and I, we agree about many things, including when our middle class is strong, America is strong. And strengthening the middle class will be my defining goal as I am President of the United States. So Pennsylvania, ours is a fight for the future of the middle class, and it is a fight for freedom. In this moment, we are witnessing a full-on attack against hard-fought, hard-won freedoms and rights. Take reproductive freedom. Now think about this. Donald Trump said he wants to punish women. And as a result of his actions, today in America, 1 out of 3 women live in a state with a Trump abortion ban. 1 out of 3. Some of these bans go back to the 1800s, even before women had a right to vote. Think about that. Well, Tim and I have a message for Trump and others who want to turn back the clock on our fundamental freedoms. We're not going back. And so let me say about Tim Walz, he has shown up to stand against these attacks long before he stood on the stage with me. After Roe was overturned, he was the first governor in the country to sign a new law that enshrined reproductive freedom as a fundamental right. And with Tim Walz by my side when I am President of the United States and we win majorities in the United States Congress, we will pass a bill to restore reproductive freedom, and I will proudly sign it into law. Tim Walz has also defended the sacred freedom to vote. As governor, he signed the most significant expansion of voting rights in Minnesota in over 50 years. And with Governor Walz's help, when I am president, we are going to finally pass the John Lewis Voting Rights Act and the Freedom to Vote Act. We're going to get it done. So Tim is a hunter and a gun owner who believes, as the majority of gun owners do, that we need reasonable gun safety laws in America. So as governor, he expanded background checks and increased penalties for illegal firearm sales. And together, when we win in November, we are finally going to pass universal background checks, red flag laws, and an assault weapons ban. Through his work, Tim, the way I think about it, he really does shine a light on a brighter future that we can build together. In his state, he has been a model chief executive, and with his experience, I'm telling you, Tim Walz will be ready on day one. In fact, when you compare his resume shall we, to Trump's running mate, well, some might say it's like a matchup between the varsity team and the JV squad. So, Pennsylvania, ultimately in this election, we each face a question. What kind of country do we want to live in? A country of freedom, compassion, and rule of law, or a country of chaos, fear, and hate? And here's the beauty of our democracy. We each have the power to answer that question. We each have the power to answer that question. The power is with the people. We love our country, and I believe it is the highest form of patriotism to fight for the ideals of our country. That is how we preserve the promise of America. And after all, the promise of America is what makes it possible for two middle-class kids, one a daughter of Oakland, California, who was raised by a working mother. The other, a son of the Nebraska plains who grew up working on a farm. It's the promise of America, because only in America is it possible for them together to make it all the way to the White House. And so Coach Walz and I may hail from different corners of our great country, but our values are the same. And we both believe in lifting people up, not knocking them down. He and I, we both know the vast majority of people in our country have so much more in common than what separates them. When we look at folks, we see in our fellow Americans neighbors, not enemies. Not enemies. And so my promise to you is this. Our campaign will reach out to everyone, from red states to blue states, from the heartland to the coast, in rural, urban, suburban, and tribal communities. We are running a campaign on behalf of all Americans. And when elected, we will govern on behalf of all Americans. And so, with Tim Walz by my side, and with all of you at our side, let us fight for the promise of our future. And with that, I ask Pennsylvania, are you ready to make your voices heard? Do we believe in freedom? Do we believe in opportunity? Do we believe in the promise of America? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win. And now, welcome the next Vice President of the United States, Tim Walz.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you and Doug, this incredible journey. And Pennsylvania, I know you know this, but my God, what a treasure you have in Josh Shapiro. Holy hell, can this guy bring the fire? He can bring the fire. This is a visionary leader. Also, I have to tell you, everybody in America knows when you need a bridge fixed, call that guy. And I think sometimes we forget, and you see people a little one-dimensional, but seeing a guy who cares so deeply about his family, a man with compassion, vision, and I'll have to tell you this, I know this from experience, there is no one you would rather go to a Springsteen concert in Jersey with than him, than that guy. Roots. And I can't wait for all of you and America to get to know my incredible wife, Gwen, a 29-year public school educator. Don't ever underestimate teachers. And our two beautiful kids, Hope and Gus. I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and to help Vice President Harris become what we all know is very, very good for us to think about. Next President of the United States of America. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, Attorney General of the great state of California, a United States Senator, and Vice President of the United States. Vice President Harris has fought on the side of the American people. She took on the predators, she took on the fraudsters, she took down the transnational gangs, she stood up against powerful corporate interests, and she never hesitated to reach across the aisle if it meant improving people's lives. And I want all of you to hold this and don't ever underestimate the power of this. She does it all with a sense of joy. I know a little something about that commitment to people. I was born in West Point, Nebraska. I lived in Butte, a small town of 400, where community was a way of life. Growing up, I spent the summers working on the family farm. My mom and dad taught us, show generosity towards your neighbors and work for a common good. My dad served in the Army during the Korean War, and with his encouragement, at 17, I joined the Army National Guard. For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation. The National Guard gave me purpose. It gave me the strength of a shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. And just as it did for my dad and millions of others, the GI Bill gave me a shot at a college education. My dad was a teacher. My brothers and sisters and I followed in their footsteps. 3 out of 4 of us married teachers. What we do. For nearly 20 years, I had the privilege of teaching high school social studies and coaching football. Including winning that state championship. Thank you. Don't ever close the yearbook. Don't ever. But it was my students. They encouraged me to run for office. They saw in me what I was hoping to instill in them, a commitment of common good, a belief that one person can make a difference. So in 2006, I took a leap and I ran for Congress. And because high school teachers are super optimistic, I was running in a district that had 1 Democrat since 1892. Well, my neighbors graced me with an opportunity to represent them in the United States House of Representatives. I'm proud of the work we did there together. I worked across the aisle on veterans issues, on agriculture, and on ways to grow rural economies. I learned the art of compromise without compromising my values. And now, as governor of the great state of Minnesota, I bring those experiences to bear in tackling the challenges that are facing our great state. Minnesota's strength comes from our values, our commitment to working together, to seeing past our differences, to always being willing to lend a helping hand. Those are the same values I learned on the family farm and tried to instill in my students. I took it to Congress and to the state capitol, and now Vice President Harris and I are running to take those very values to the White House. Now, Donald Trump sees the world a little differently than us. First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself. Again and again and again, Trump weakens our economy to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division. And that's to say nothing of his record as president. He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed. You know, some of us are, some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. These guys are after my heart chanting, mind your own damn business. That feels good, so thank you. Look, that includes IVF, and this gets personal for me and my family. When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And for our children to be free to go to school without worrying they'll be shot dead in their classrooms. By the way, as you heard, I was one of the best shots in Congress, but in Minnesota, we believe in the Second Amendment, but we also believe in common sense gun violence laws. Vice President Harris' idea of freedom is a ticket for education to be that ticket to the middle class, not crippling debt. Air that's clean, water that's pure, communities that are safe. A place where we settle our political differences not through violence, but with our votes. And that's what this election's about. What direction will this country go in? He's not going back. Well, Donald Trump would damn sure take us backwards. Let's be clear about that. And don't believe him when he plays dumb. He knows exactly what Project 2025 will do to restrict our freedoms. To rig the economy to help the super rich. If Trump gets a chance to return, he's going to pick up exactly where he left off 4 years ago. Only this time, it will be much, much worse. Raising costs on middle-class family. He will repeal the Affordable Care Act, no doubt about it. He'll gut Social Security and Medicare. And when somebody tells you they believe him. He said he'd ban abortion across this country, and he'll do it, whether or not Congress is there or not. Donald Trump's not fighting for you or your family. He never sat at that kitchen table like the one I grew up at, wondering how we were going to pay the bills. He sat at his country club up in Mar-a-Lago, wondering how he can cut taxes for his rich friends. And I got to tell you, his running mate shares his dangerous and backward agenda for this country. J.D. Vance literally wrote the foreword for the architect of the Project 2025 agenda. Like all regular people I grew up with in the heartland, J.D. studied at Yale, had his career funded by Silicon Valley billionaires, and then wrote a bestseller trashing that community. Come on! That's not what middle America is. And I got to tell you, I can't wait to debate the guy. That is, if he's willing to get off the couch and show up. So. You see what I did there? Look. I got to tell you, pointing out just an observation of mine that I made. I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy, and yes, just weird as hell. That's what you see. That's what you see. So you know what's out there, so say it with me. We aren't going back. We aren't going back. We are not going back. So we got 91 days. My God, that's easy. We'll sleep when we're dead. Over those next 91 days and every day in the White House, I'll have Vice President Harris's back. Every single day. And we'll have yours. You know how this works. We can't do it alone. We need you, each and every one of you. Go over to KamalaHarris.com, get on board, because we need you. Freedom to make our own choices. This leader, this compassionate, careful, joyous leader believes in each and every one of you. My God, you came here tonight to sit at the very top because you love this country and you're not going back. She believes in the opportunity for every single person to join the middle class. She believes in the promise of America. We just got to fight. We just got to fight. Because as soon-to-be President Harris says, when we fight, we win. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Vice President. God bless America.
Tim Walz, the governor of Minnesota and now candidate for vice president. The first campaign event by Kamala Harris and her new running mate, Tim Walz. You can see there with both of their spouses on stage, and Tim Walz said he looked forward to America getting to know his wife. They head out from here in Pennsylvania, this packed arena. They go to battleground states, including Michigan and Wisconsin next. They're at Temple University. This was the first time America is seeing these two together. Kamala Harris just announced her pick to be her running mate today. And as you heard, she has secured officially the Democratic nomination now. That process, that voting process began about a week ago, and she has locked it up. This is Libby Casey with the Washington Post. I'm joined by Rhonda Colvin and James Hohmann. Rhonda, takeaways from those speeches tonight.
Well, I'm left thinking, did they leave anything for the DNC convention? Because that, you know, that room felt like it had a lot of energy, very similar to how we were discussing when we were at the RNC covering that there was a lot of energy there. This looks like sort of the pep rally for that. So we'll see in a few weeks' time, a week and a half actually, what will be in store there. But a couple things that struck me, and I've heard him reference joy before, but he said it multiple times. Walz did in his speech. He also consistently kept saying, we're not going back. That's also something that the crowd was chanting as well. That, you know, those seem like simple words and phrases, but that is a stark contrast to what voters are considering in the Trump-Vance ticket. Oftentimes we hear from the former president complaints or negativity. Even what he said about Walz this morning after he learned the pick seemed to be, tinged in very negative terms. So the fact that they are talking about bringing joy back, bringing, not going back, which could mean a lot of different things to a lot of people, that could be a very effective message. And I keep looking through the lens of people I've talked to, voters who say, I'm anxious about this election. I don't know what to do. There's been that enthusiasm gap. It feels like this type of situation right now is going to speak to those voters, is going to help them not only make their decision, but potentially add to her volunteers. We know she had, a slew of volunteers decide that they wanted to participate. This is all going to be a turnout game in November. That's really going to make the difference in a lot of these close states. And if you have people excited all the way to November, that could really change some things. So it looks like the enthusiasm gap that a lot of Americans were talking about, if you're just going to look at this event, that could have been solved for the Democrats. And it's just the question of, are they going to be able to maintain it?
You're seeing these bracelets on people taking their photos right now. Those were given out to folks as they came in, glowing in red, white, and blue. The lines stretched for blocks. Colleagues have reported on how a lot of people were turning out tonight to be here. James, what stands out to you from this first appearance by the Harris-Walz campaign?
The energy. This felt like a rally in late October, the weekend before the election, where everyone is keyed in. It is such a contrast from just a few weeks ago when Joe Biden was struggling to draw crowds, was struggling to excite Democrats. This is the key swing state that is going to determine whether Kamala Harris wins the presidency. We're 91 days out, and tonight we really got a first look at Coach Walz. Mm-hmm. Kamala Harris clearly loves calling him Coach Walz. She said Coach as he was talking, and really teed up a very strong contrast, saying, Tim Walz is varsity, J.D. Vance is junior varsity, and it was a disciplined message. It's such a contrast also to Donald Trump at the National Association of Black Journalists meeting last week, where he was going off on bizarre tangents, and in Trump's own rallies. Trump had a rally in this very venue 2 weeks ago, a much smaller crowd, much less energy, and they are approaching this campaign. And you heard Kamala Harris say it at the top. They are the underdogs. They have the momentum, and you mentioned joy, Rhonda. You feel it just watching. I mean, this is what winning looks like, and it hasn't looked like that for Democrats for a while, for several months. But this is what a winning campaign looks like.
Kamala Harris made a lot of Tim Walz's personal biography, where he comes from, how he grew up, what he's done with his life. And there's been a lot of talk about Minnesota nice, but Tim Walz threw some punches, Rhonda. We saw him give some blows to J.D. Vance in particular, the guy who he wants to beat to get into the vice presidency. Talk to us about the approach he's taking. Yeah,
it also injected some humor, perhaps. I mean, he did make a joke about the couch or getting off the couch for J.D. Vance. But
I know I'm going to have to explain that to some family members later. Okay.
People can Google it. I'm just, I'll just stick to what I know. He see again with that everyman, common man theme with this pick of this VP candidate. I think it shows because he is talking in plain speak. He's getting a little humor in. He also is appearing not to be afraid to take on that other ticket, saying that he wanted to debate Vance anytime. So, I think sort of strategists might call it the brilliance of picking someone like him is because it's not only his record that could speak to a lot of Democrats, it's also just the optics of him. When he stepped on stage, he was clearly happy to be there. He did seem like a football coach or a high school teacher that maybe we all remember. He just seemed happy to be there. And I think that could go a long way, not only, with a blue wall strategy, but just with people who just have not been feeling very enthused about this election. So again, this was a moment for the world or the nation to meet Coach Walz, as the vice president was referring to him as. And we'll see what happens in the coming weeks. I think the momentum thing is really the question. Are they able to keep this up past the DNC convention, throughout any debates that might be planned, and into November? It's going to be very interesting to watch. And I'm just stunned that the three of us were at this table just a few weeks ago, not knowing the future of this ticket, not knowing if Biden would still be there. And now it feels like night and day, where you have Democrats who look like they really have a fighting chance right now and are really feeling that.
The Republicans rolled out J.D. Vance at the RNC at the Republican gathering just a couple of weeks ago, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for him. It really felt like people were enthused about him because Donald Trump was excited about him. What do you get is the sense of Democrats reacting to Tim Walz? Is it because Kamala Harris likes him, or are they finding connection with him already in this first day?
Democrats want to win. They want to defeat Donald Trump. He, I think, can be whatever you want him to be. If you're a moderate Democrat, you can see that he was a moderate for 6 terms in the House. If you're a liberal, progressive member of the squad, like Ilhan Omar from his home state, then you can see someone who's willing to advance progressive priorities when he has the opportunity to. I think it's not lost on prominent Democrats that Kamala Harris will be, if she wins, the first woman president, the first African-American and Indian woman president. And Harris was mindful of that. All 6 of her finalists for the job were white men. And watching her body language during that speech, you could tell she was someone who was happy with her choice. Republicans are going to try to paint Tim Walz as this wannabe San Francisco liberal. And if Walz performs like that, and if millions of Americans see it, it's not going to stick. The come on, the talking about being a coach, being a teacher, being enlisted in the Army. He is not going to be the caricature they want to portray him as, and ultimately, the contrast you also see is Donald Trump has sort of distanced himself from J.D. Vance in some ways. When he was asked at the Black Journalist Conference last week, what about Vance's comments on childless cat ladies? He said, well, you have to ask J.D. Vance. And then he went on a whole long thing about how vice presidential picks don't matter, and it doesn't make a difference except for the first couple days. I think Tim Walz doesn't do as well in rural Minnesota as he used to do. There has been this sorting out. I don't think just because Tim Walz is from next door means that he's going to win Wisconsin. But what I do think is that Walz can go into rural parts of places. He can talk about his work on the Farm Bill. He can talk about his time in the military in delivering for veterans, and that is going to reassure a couple % of voters. It's going to fire up the base, but it's also potentially going to reassure swing voters who might be a little anxious or uneasy with Kamala Harris.
And he is a counterpoint to the pick of J.D. Vance, who is also trying to go after those same voters. One thing about Tim Walz is he seems to genuinely be rankled by and bothered by hillbilly elegy and the conclusions that J.D. Vance comes to that. And so I think we're going to hear a lot about that on the trail as he talks about the contrast between the two of them and their visions for America. Final thoughts from you, Rhonda, about what's coming up in the next couple of weeks.
Well, as we've been saying, we are headed to Chicago for the DNC convention. So again, if that was just the pre-party, what are we in store for in Chicago? But the final thought is that it seems as if this party now has the energy they need to compete. I was just looking at some recent polling. This race is still tight, but Harris does have a little bit of momentum. So we'll see where that goes. We'll see if they're able to contain it and use it to their advantage. And we're also looking out to see how Republicans are going to continue to respond to this pick. It's only been a few hours, really, for them to get their talking points together. But moving forward, I'm interested in hearing how are they going to attack this ticket now, because there do seem to be a lot of pluses that will work with the electorate.
Well, that does it for us. As we saw tonight, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz presenting their vision for America as the Democratic ticket for president and vice president. They head out from Pennsylvania to hit the trail on a battleground states tour on to Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada. We will continue to cover the Harris-Walz campaign and that of Donald Trump and J.D. Vance. As Rhonda mentioned, starting on August 19th, we will be live at the Democratic National Convention in Chicago, so please do join us for that. Thanks for watching live coverage with The Washington Post. You can follow all of our campaign coverage at WashingtonPost.com and on our Washington Post app. I'm Libby Casey. Have a good night.
I am your warrior. I am your justice. I am your retribution.
I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I know Donald Trump's type.
The 2024 election is in full swing. For every key campaign moment, The Washington Post is there, bringing you live coverage with insight and analysis. From landmark Supreme Court decisions to the sentencing of Donald Trump. We'll be on location reporting live from the Republican and Democratic national conventions and the presidential and vice presidential debates. It all leads up to our 2024 Election Night Special, providing real-time race calls, live updates from our reporters on the ground, monitoring the pivotal races that will determine the balance of power in Washington and the future of our country. No one covers politics and elections like The Washington Post, because democracy dies in darkness.